Ask the secretary to determine whether or not quorum's present. I believe that it is. We also have another on the way. Now to approval of minutes from our June 13th meeting. Those minutes were distributed to all the members previously. Any objections or corrections to the minutes from any members? Seeing none, without objection, say unanimous consent, we'll adopt the minutes as distributed. Seeing no objection, the minutes will be so adopted. Now we'll move on to our first substantive item on the agenda, which will be a presentation from First Energy on some ongoing solar projects. At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Doug Hartman to the podium. Mr. Hartman is the Director of Energy Services for First Energy, and we greatly appreciate you being here, Mr. Hartman.
Yeah, thank you to the authority. How we look at it, it's always great to have an opportunity just to increase a little more awareness around solar in West Virginia. And labor perspective, our philosophy was to use our labor partners who are also supporting our Harrison Fort Martin facilities. And and I have a couple slides where I'll have some photos where you'll see our Fort Martin solar site that's under current construction. But as of last Wednesday, we had 70 individuals out at that site. These are 70 individuals who also work our spring and fall outages for our coal plants. So whether they're operators, they're carpenters, they're electricians, these are the folks that are out at the Fort Martin site constructing that facility. We look at domestic sourcing. That's always been right up front. We wanted to kind of buy American. So from our perspective, domestic sourcing was important. It was important before the federal government ever passed the IRA. But so we kind of had our domestic sources locked up well in advance. So our panels, for example, come from Toledo, Ohio. So that's where our manufacturing of panels are being sourced. Site controls, these are basically liabilities, or call them assets now. We'll call them assets. Our sites are all First Energy or Mon Power or Potomac Edison controlled areas, or Allegheny Energy Supply in some cases. So site control was also something that was important to us. Interconnection was a little dynamic. PJM has, they're working through a queue process that has some delays associated with it, and that's starting to move forward. All of our sites being a little smaller, they equal up to 50 megawatts, but all of our sites, the nice thing about them being smaller is we can interconnect directly into our distribution grid, our distribution system, which obviously is a Mon Power system or a Potomac Edison system. So interconnection was a little different than having to go through the PJM queue process, where it may be a 26, 27 agreement that we would be able to execute. So that was very important for us, and certainly a good outcome. Finally, from an environmental perspective, our sites are, we kind of evaluate, and we would prioritize sites based on how they rank. And environmental was an area that we weren't looking at sites that would end up having an impact in wetlands or being encroaching upon streams. So we were avoiding those areas. We've actually had a site, one of our facilities, where we actually shrunk the area just from a threatened and endangered species perspective. So we definitely want to be stewards of the environment. The other thing we're doing at all of our sites, we'll have pollinator mixes, so our solar sites will look wonderful in the spring. So these are the 5 sites that we currently have in our phase 1, and just as a reminder from the Senate bill, this is 50 megawatts. As we subscribe our our customer commitment, we can actually go up to 200 megawatts of solar. So 5 sites we expect to be in operation and generating in 2024 is our Fort Martin site. That's adjacent right up next to our Fort Martin power plant, and I'll actually have a couple photos to show on that. Marlow site was the R. Paul Smith site, which is a Maryland retired power plant, and actually sluiced the bottom ash, fly ash over to West Virginia landfill that was clean closed or remediated, and so we're building at that location. Wiley Ridge is around a substation site. Our Reesville site is basically our 2 ash sites up at the Reesville facility, so we're actually working with the DEP on those sites, just on our permits, from the permits perspective, because there is an active permit on one of those sites. And then our Davis site's a reclaimed strip mine site down in Davis, West Virginia. The little chart on the right, that just gives you an idea of how many megawatt hours you're expecting to get out of each of these smaller solar facilities. So just a shot, this is last Wednesday morning to be exact. So Fort Martin power plant, the coal plant, actually sits right over here. You can just barely see some of the cooling tower plume coming up from over the hill. Fort Martin facility, it's in active construction today. Expect to have it complete by December 31st, 2023. It's one of our larger sites at 19 megawatts. And again, 19 megawatts is not an enormous solar facility, but it's certainly one of the larger ones in West Virginia. 19 megawatts, we will see about a $16 million benefit from the investment tax credit through the IRA, just at the Fort Martin facility. So just a little statistics on the site, about 6,000 piles, that's these guys here, 6,000 of these things, basically driven into the ground. And in some cases where you come across some rocky earth, you might have to drill in the ground. But we've been pretty successful in getting a lot of those piles driven already. 52% complete, all the cabling's complete. We expect the first solar panels, originally it was going to be October delivery, and we ordered these, that would have been March of 2022. So that just shows you that panel delivery is stretched out 14, 16 months, 18 months is what we were seeing. Today, if we were to order panels, you're looking at 26, 27 delivery date because a lot of the pressure that's going on in the solar industry. So there is some congestion, especially for American-made materials. Switchgear deliveries are what we'll call critical path. So switchgear is it's being manufactured in Canton, Ohio, from a partner that provides a lot of the switchgear in our transmission build out. But so our switchgear delivery would be November. It is interesting to go across this site and just see the orchestration that's going on. Again, our team is learning, our labor force is learning the process. We did not bring in a crew from another state. These are 68 of them are from Morgantown, 2 of them are from Parkersburg. But yeah, these guys are learning how to install solar arrays. So it's nice to see them learn and how they can improve almost every time they go to a different segment of the site. This site here has about 6 mini sites, if you want to call them. There will be 6 inverters that will generate some form of electricity, totaling up to 19 megawatts. And just another shot. This is looking southwest of the Fort Martin facility. Again, you can see a lot of the activity at the facility here just this last Wednesday. Good weather this day. Just another benefit, being so close to Fort Martin. So we have our E&S controls, obviously, for anything for the construction project itself. And then if something is identified by our monitoring personnel, we reach out right to the Fort Martin team. They come up with a crew, and they're doing the maintenance, and they're doing the site improvements for our E&S controls at the site. So again, just another synergy that we have building so close to one of our large fossil facilities. I probably should have covered it earlier when I showed the megawatt hours. So just Fort Martin itself is about 33,000 megawatt hours. So over the course of a year, it will generate 33,000 megawatt hours of solar electricity. Fort Martin plant, the power plant, can generate 33,000 megawatt hours in about 30 hours. So just a relative example of, the magnitude of a coal plant, one of our big, large coal facilities versus a solar asset that obviously generates some different attributes that customers enjoy and they're interested in. But when it comes to generation, our coal facilities really can generate the megawatts. Again, this is our program, and that nice bright red line, those are the customers to date that we have subscribed. Actually, I looked just this morning, we have an additional 15 customers that we need to get into the system. So we're over 700 customers. These are residential. We have an industrial customer, a large industrial customer. I'll talk about the federal customer that we have, and then we have a municipality who's signed up under our program. But this 720 plus, now it's 735, I think. But this is just constantly growing. And this trend line is really where the awareness is starting to really kick in. As people are becoming more aware, they want to participate in solar. And if they want to just do 10% of their electric bill, they can pay $4 extra a month. And that's just part of the participation of the solar program. The average residential customer uses about 1 megawatt hour a month. So 1 megawatt is 1 solar SREC. So if a customer wants to subscribe to 100% renewable energy through their electric bill, they would have a $40 charge on top of their electric bill. So that would be equivalent to the 1 megawatt hour that they use. I mentioned delivery in 2024 from our Fort Martin site. And then 2025, we'll continue to bring solar energy onto the grid, again, in staggered, so we can construct the facilities ourselves. I mentioned the federal facility requirements. So there was an executive order that was put out last year, and that executive order is 14057, if I recall. By 2030, all federal facilities have to be 100% renewable, use 100% renewable energy. Well, in our service territory, we have a significant load of federal customers in our service territory. So when you look at that significant load and they have to have renewable energy supplied into their facility or represented into their facility, it does make for an opportunity for renewable energy from our perspective, supporting our federal customers. Along with that, 100% renewable energy by 2030, they have a 50% 24/7 requirement. So obviously solar only works during the day. So there has to be some way of renewable energy in the back hours or the off day hours. So we're looking at storage options for our next 3 phases of solar. It's not part of our first phase, but it will be something that we're evaluating pretty hard for our future phases, just because it's something that the customers are going to need. We want to make sure we can provide that service to those customers. The other just interesting information about the 14057, 2 points I'll make. First, in 2027, all new federal vehicles, light-duty vehicles after 2027, as they're procured and brought online or purchased by the federal entity, they have to be 100% electric. So now you're looking at, there has to be some type of potential infrastructure. If you increase a facility by 30 electric cars, you might not be able to serve it through that small 12.5 kV line. So it's something that certainly the utilities and the federal entities are having conversations around, just because of the upgrades that may be required for those facilities to meet their electric car EV demand. And then just the other comment on the federal facility. So last year would have been in the August, September timeframe. I spoke at a meeting down in Cincinnati, and West Virginia was one of 11, Mon Power was one of 11 entities that had basically the program that was aligned perfectly with 14057. So essentially it's just the federal facilities were able to buy renewable energy or subscribe to renewable energy that is manufactured after October of 2021, It's in the same balancing authority or balancing area, so you're not buying Texas Wind and, saying you're using renewable energy in the state. So it's basically in the same balancing authority. Since we're a vertically integrated utility, we check all the boxes per se for those federal entities to increase subscription rates. So those are great conversations we're having with the federal entities, and expect to carry on those conversations as we continue to run the state. And shameless plug, our solar site. If you were to go on the site, anyone can subscribe if you're in our service territory. That's one of the first screening tools they use. Anyone can subscribe to our West Virginia solar program. Let's see. And just last slide. This is our Mon Power headquarters right there in Fairmont. We did install we'll call it the microsite, and I think there was a news article on the microsite. But what's interesting about this, it's completely off-grid, right? So it's solar panel, it's a battery, and it goes to a level 2 car charger. So it's about a 12 kilowatt array. These are the first solar panels. Our partners in Toledo had some that they could spare us. So basically, this small array is about a 12 kilowatt array. When they were plugging in a car and charging, and again, this is more on the R&D side, we just wanted to see if it could keep up with the charging. Well, it charges at about 6 kilowatts, and it was generating at about 7 kilowatts. So there was still a little bit of extra energy going into the battery during the day when they were charging the EV here at our Mon Power headquarters. So we call that our microsite that was installed. So there we go. I think I am about complete with my presentation. There's some other contact information towards the back of the presentation, but now as we continue to, FirstEnergy, as we continue to move forward with our future phases of solar and meeting our customer needs, we see it as it's certainly going to be something that some customers are going to be looking for. It's certainly not going to displace our coal plants, our supercritical Harrison, Fort Martin facilities. But it is something that adds to that energy mix across the state. So with that, I'll take any questions y'all might have.
Any questions from the authority? Mr. Kern?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for being here. What is the total acreage on the panel array that you showed us earlier?
Yeah,
so Fort Martin is about 94 acres.
94 acres. So rule of thumb, it's about 5 acres per megawatt. So that's a good rule of thumb. Sometimes you can squeeze them into 4 acres. But rule of thumb, 5 acres. Some areas where maybe you're more terrain, you may be using 7 acres. Tracking systems where you're trying to follow the sun, they tend to use a little more space. So you may not have the same capacity, but they're trying to generate just as many megawatt hours. Systems aren't as valuable, I'll say, to us. But so yeah, acres, 94 acres at Fort Martin, about 5 acres per megawatt generated. Good question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here. Great presentation. How many of the facilities are located on reclaimed ash piles? One or?
So our Marlow site is out here in the very eastern panhandle. It's right on the Potomac River. That's a reclaimed ash site. And then our Reesville site, it's actually 2 separate. It's a Reesville East, Reesville West. There's the Reesville West site, which is an unpermitted ash location, and then there's the Reesville East site, which is basically we just closed that ash site. So when you have a construction on ash sites, they're ballasted systems. You're not penetrating the soil. You're basically, we've seen them with Jersey barrier type construction. You also see them with concrete, big buckets that the piles go into of concrete, so the solar arrays don't. But yeah, so those sites, and then our Fort Martin site is literally right adjacent to our large ash site. Actually, we had to avoid one of the monitoring wells because of the location of the Fort Martin site. Yeah, good question.
Any more before I get Doug, FirstEnergy Is it correct, there's a, as far as the energy, electricity distributed within West Virginia, that there's essentially a deficit, you do not generate as much as what you end up selling back to the customers, so you use additional capacity through the PJM.
Yeah,
Depending on the day,
we had a meeting at presentation with Leadership West Virginia last week, and we had talked about this exact topic. Obviously, in most days, I would say for energy, we can provide our customers the energy that's needed. Capacity, we will be short capacity for our customers, so this will help with the capacity aspect of things. But in any given day, you may lose a unit for whatever reason where it's not available, or it's in outage, and now you have a customer demand that's higher than what we can provide because our supply is not the 3,050 megawatts that it is. So it's you can have situations where, yeah, you may buy from the market to fill that energy need. In other situations where we have excess energy, we're able to sell that into the market at whatever the energy price is, and then that's to the benefit of the customers. So, yeah, good question. Did that get to your?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's fair to say, if you continued investing into these alternative energy production methods, it's not going to reduce the load need on the coal-fired plants.
No. And actually, if
Interestingly, you know, our if you look at the generation of a solar site, it's very, very small, but it's daily. So it's every day when the peak's up and the power prices are up. What's nice about our program and working through the distribution side is it's an offset to what we would have to go out and purchase in the PJM market. So it's not in PJM yet. We have it in a PJM queue, but it's just through the distribution system at this time.
What are there challenges of West Virginia continuing to invest in some of these facilities? I'm sure they're all require significant capital investment, but they're not producing a whole lot of megawatts. So it'd be nice to have some more. So what are there caps, West Virginia that prevent further production? Do you have like a megawatt cap, or are there other obstacles?
but we do have a megawatt.
There is a megawatt cap under the Senate bill. It's 200 megawatts per utility. So we have 200 and yeah, it's a 200 megawatt capacity. We have 200 and AEP has 200 cap. So 400 is kind of the state cap. Those would have to be filed by 2025, December 31st, 2025, to be within the program. Construction-wise, again, those out years are when they're going to be constructed. Just the material's not readily available. So there is some supply chain constraints that we'll see. Everybody is going to see as you're building solar across the country. But yeah, our caps are 200 per utility in the state.
At this time.
Is First Energy, I guess, what other areas outside of West Virginia and your other footprints are you areas of alternative generation, or is First Energy investing in?
Yeah, we're West Virginia being our only vertically integrated state. It's the one where we can invest in the generation. All of our other states that we operate in, unfortunately, are competitive generation states, so we don't operate in the competitive market anymore. So, yeah, that's correct.
Any other questions, Mr. Hartman? Good. Seeing none, Mr. Hartman, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Now I'll move on to our next agenda item, which is an overview of some grant programs that the Department of Environmental Protection is working on. By Ms. Laura Crowder to the podium, who is the Director of DEP's Division of Air Quality.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I've got to set the microphone on the podium because I don't have a pocket. So, okay, I'm Laura Crowder. I'm the director for the Division of Air Quality, and one of the things that we're working on now is the EPA has a program for the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. It's a $5 billion program. So the program's set up in 2 phases. The first phase is a non-competitive program. It's $250 million out of the $5 billion. All the states get $3 million over 4 years to establish a climate action plan. And then the second phase is a competitive phase that there's $4.6 billion, and that's competitive. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, in the first phase, what we call the planning grant is the phase 1, and there are 3 deliverables over 4 years. The first deliverable is what we call the PCAP, which is a Priority Climate Action Plan. It is due to EPA by March the 1st of 2024. It has to identify near-term implementation-ready measures that can be applied so that the projects and measures that we identify in the PCAP can apply for money of that $4.6 billion. So that is a prerequisite to be eligible to apply for the $4.6 billion. Then there's the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, which is due about a year and a half later, and it has to identify greenhouse gas reduction measures, all the inventory and all the sinks that we have, and then it looks at long-term, which is near-term and long-term, or 2030 and 2050 goals that we would set. They're not they're goals. They're not requirements to be met, but they're goals, and show means of how we'll get there. And then we have a status report due in 2027. So under the planning grant, which is the first phase, the $3 million, these are the things that we can do that we can spend that money on. And one of them is the outreach and education for the groups that would be what we call eligible entities to apply for the grants. So we have to identify projects or measures that we can implement and that are ready to apply for, that are actually ready to apply for a grant come next April. So between now and March, we have to identify these projects, and that's what all the stuff that we have to do that we can do for that. So right now, DEP is the lead agency on the planning grant. We're working with WVU, Marshall, and Intermarket, which is a nonprofit. We want to identify, we want to develop an all-of-the-above energy strategy, and we will actively engage with other agencies and municipalities to identify greenhouse gas reduction measures for inclusion in the PCAP. We'll also be talking to industry sources and identifying other things that they're doing when we're developing these plans. So eligible entities to apply for the implementation grants in the second phase, which are states, air pollution control agencies, municipalities, which EPA defines as counties, cities, towns, boroughs, or groups of those entities. So when we're looking for projects and measures that can be implemented, we'll be looking to identify groups that have projects that they want to fund. So we'll be talking to a number of different entities. We'll be collaborating starting in the next month or so. We'll be reaching out to a bunch of different state agencies, municipalities, and industry sources to talk to them about what they can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So there are measures that EPA has identified as example measures. There's energy efficiency projects, If you're renovating a building, you can insulation, LED lighting, more energy efficient heating and cooling, renewable energy, supply chain issues that you can address, waste reduction and diversion strategies, recycling things, reducing methane emissions, increasing fuel efficiency. These are all just examples of what can be included for grants in the implementation phase. These are the things that we have to when we do the planning grant and the deliverables that we have to put together these things, and they're what's required under the first phase, the second phase, and then the status report at the end. In addition to identifying the emissions that are out there, we also need to identify the benefits that will come to through the implementation of these. We have to review the authority to implement them. Like if there are certain things that we can't do because there's no authority, we need to identify those as well. The other thing, workforce planning, analyses, and analysis of benefits to what EPA calls low-income disadvantaged communities. So those are what's required, and they're strongly encouraged in some sections and required in others. So this is a national inventory. When you look at across the nation, 29% of the greenhouse gases nationwide are from transportation, 25% from electricity, 24% from industry, 10% from ag and commercial. And anyway, so West Virginia has a totally different look than that. We have about 48% of our greenhouse gases are from the electric power industry. Our industry is about 35%, and only 11% of our greenhouse gases are from transportation. So we have a different footprint. Only 1% for residential, and I think it's 3% for commercial and 2% for ag. So we have a different mix there. We also have a different mix on what the greenhouse gases that we have are. In West Virginia, it's about 75% of carbon dioxide, and our next biggest is methane, which is 23%. So the reduction of methane and carbon dioxide are key to reducing greenhouse gases in West Virginia. This is just looking at the historical emissions, because 2005 is the base year. So if we look at what our emissions were in 2005, we had, it's 143, I think, million tons of CO2. But you can see that the electric power industry was a large percentage, and it's still a large percentage, but it's a significantly less of a percentage. We had a total of about 26% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from 2005 through 2020. The power industry reduced by 41%. We had a 5% decrease in transportation. So these are the differences. And when we set goals, we're going to have to set them based on 2005. So the reductions from there moving forward. This is a slightly different way to look at it. This is by what we call inventory sector. Waste and agriculture, but you can see that the biggest thing is energy usage. So it's energy usage is what causes greenhouse gases. And then the green at the bottom is the negative, and that's our carbon sinks, which is like forests absorb CO2. So that's where that comes in. So we have to do, this gets a little bit more detailed, but there has to be an analysis of the quantified greenhouse gas reduction measures. We have to identify what the emissions are and then what they will be in the future, and show what the reductions will be. So we'll have to project into the future what's going to happen. And then we have to do a benefits analysis, which looks at not just greenhouse gases, but also co-benefits. If you reduce fuel usage, you also reduce the other pollutants that that you might be emitting. And then there's analyses that are required further down in the CCAP, which is due out in 2025. But there's air quality improvements, health outcomes, economic benefits, and climate resilience. So then, as I said earlier, we have to look at, it's required to look at low-income and disadvantaged communities and what the benefits would be there. Are there co-pollutant emission reductions? Are there, do they have increased jobs, workforce development, those types of things? Decreased energy costs due to energy efficiency improvements. And then this is a slide that I took from EPA, but what I wanted to highlight here is that there are processes that emit greenhouse gases that also have other pollutants that they emit. And when you reduce greenhouse gases, that the last bullet here is that there can be unintended increases in co-pollutants. So an example is electricity usage to reduce greenhouse gases might reduce them in total, and they could reduce the co-pollutant emissions where the electricity is consumed, but it could also cause an increase in pollutants where the energy is actually generated. So for the implementation grants, EPA expects to hold 2 competitions for the $4.6 billion. One is a general competition that will be open to states and municipalities, and then the second one is for tribes and territories. The eligible entities, which are pretty much government agencies and municipalities, cities, towns, or groups of the above, they will be eligible if they're listed specifically in a PCAP. And EPA expects that the awards that they will be giving out will be between, for states, between $2 million and $500 million. So they're getting ready to release the notice of funding opportunity in September. And then the applications will be due April the 1st is the expected date right now. So we're looking to identify those types of projects that would be in the range of $2 million to $500 million to include in our PCAP. The other thing that's required under this is to look at what other funding is available, and there's a lot of funding available under the IRA and different government programs. So under the PCAP, it's encouraged, but under the CCAP, it's required that we identify other funding mechanisms. So right now, these are just a number of grants that are available, funding opportunities that are available that EPA has out there. There's $5 billion, which is what the climate pollution reduction grant that we're talking about, but there's also $1.5 billion for methane reduction. There's product declaration assistance. There's $250 million. There's millions of dollars here in these different programs. And then there's also the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. There's $27 billion available there. EPA expects, it's got 3 components. EPA expects for the National Clean Investment Fund to have $14 billion that they will award to 2 to 3 nonprofits that will help pair public money with private money for industrial, and then for industrial clean energy projects. Then there's the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. There's $6 billion available there. It'll go to 2 to 7 nonprofit hubs that will help with communities to put out clean energy technology projects as well. There's also $7 billion for the Solar for All program, which is a residential solar program. They expect to give out 60 grants to states and territories. The notice of intent to apply for that is due the 31st of this month. If you're a state and if you're if you're like a nonprofit or somebody that's also, their deadline is a little later. So I think it's like the 15th of August. So, questions?
Questions from vendors? Secure
Laura, first, thanks for being here on such short notice and a pretty good summation of a lot of work that I know your staff's been doing. But as I understand it, I mean, just as we incorporate in and find partnerships and where the state plan is going to implement, and not to do anything, but, with what First Energy proposal they have right now, the reductions they're doing, are those the type of things that can be gathered in and incorporated into the state plan? I mean, how much capacity will we have to draw in interest from the outreach that we do on that?
They can all be included in the plan because we have to identify reductions, and we'll be talking to the industry. But EPA has asked for us to set target goals that would show how much reductions we can get and identify projects that can be done, not just for that would be eligible for the implementation grant monies, but the other monies that are out there for all the different programs that EPA and DOE and other federal agencies have available that would also result in greenhouse gas emission reductions. So if we can identify those, we can incorporate all those types of reductions into the plan.
David, just one follow-up. You mentioned that they would prefer to see projects coupled for
Yeah, like
their total benefit.
Yeah, they want to, if you identify a project, even if it's putting solar panels on a state building or going in and renovating a state building and putting in insulation and LED lighting and new heating and cooling, you're going to save a certain amount of energy, and there are tools that will identify the greenhouse gas reductions that you get from that. So you get not only greenhouse gas reductions, but if you're using less energy than the emissions that would have been generated at the power plant, you also offset those. So there's sulfur and NOx and other pollutants, particulate matter, that would also be a co-benefit.
Thank you.
Mr. Allen?
Laura, thank you. Great presentation. Have you guys considered conducting an inventory of forest carbon credits as a form of reducing the CO2 emissions as far as the state goes? I don't know if you're focused on a balance of that. What does our forest land consume annually, or if that's part of the consideration? It seems more industrial, like, hardwired type solution.
Carbon sinks and carbon credits are things that need to be considered, that we have to look at when we do the second of what we call the CCAP, the second plan that we have to do. And we have to look at what can be done there. But you have to, it's not just, I know that there are agencies in other states and that there are ways that companies now and groups can purchase land and basically say we're not going to do anything with it for a certain amount of time, and they can generate carbon credits for that. And we can look at projects like that and see if the state wants to do something. Those are all things that can be examined under this, and we can decide if it should be included in a plan, and then how we would implement it. I don't think that would be DEP. I think it would be a different state agency that would be able to apply for a grant to implement a program like that.
Thank you.
All right, nice presentation, thank you. One quick question back on slide 11. You have a comparison of charts from 2005 to 2020. And I see electric power industry is, indicated pretty heavily there. Where does natural gas emissions and that sort of thing fall into there? Because I don't see them identified.
It would be in industry.
In industry?
Yeah, it would be in the industry side.
Do you have a breakout of what percentage that would be of the 37.5?
Not right here. No.
Okay.
I mean, there's
there's ways to slice and dice the data, but I didn't slice it and dice it that way. I can tell you that most of it all goes into the energy portion. When you look at it from the inventory sector, you're looking more at the, it's pretty much energy. Yeah.
Thank you.
One more quick follow-up, if I may.
Secretary,
Thank you. More sorry to keep. So I understand this correctly, the 25, 26% reductions that we've captured post-2005, as we go forward with reductions, those can be
Those
claimed
are-
and credited. So
those are
the
claimed.
work that's already been done,
Right.
it will be recognized going forward in our application process.
Yes.
Thank you.
any further questions? Seeing none, Ms. Crowder, thank you very much for being here. This was great. At this time, we'll move to our next agenda item, which is an update on the West Virginia Office of Energy. And for that, we'll be hearing from our recently departed Vice Chairman of this committee, Mr. Nicholas Preserbati. For anyone who may not be aware, he resigned from us and accepted a position from the governor to run our state's Office of Energy, and is going to be working very closely with us as much as he ever was before. So, Mr. Preserbati.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll say it's a different view standing up here than from the table. I appreciate it. Wanted to give just a quick overview of the Office of Energy, where we're located, what we do, what our priorities are, and then I'd like to finish on the goals of the Office of Energy. So we're located in the Department of Economic Development. Secretary Carmichael oversees and comes from primarily three sources. It's the U.S. Department of Energy State Energy Program funding. Then a significant part comes from the Inflation Reduction Act, and then the last is from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Significant influx of funds there through the office to certain programs I'll go into here in a minute. Two of the primary focuses that we have right now, we have been in the office several weeks. One of the most important things we're looking at now is identifying additional opportunities of funding through the IRA, through the IIJA, and identifying those and taking advantage of those opportunities, funding grants before they go away. So that's a primary focus right now. A second focus is going to be assisting with the Department of Environmental Protection on the CRP, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan. Ms. Crowder just discussed, been working with Secretary Ward and determining to what extent the Office of Energy is going to be able to assist them with that project. So that's going to be a very important focus for us going forward as well. Several programs, more significant programs that we have is the Grid Resilience Program. It's a $20 million grant over 5 years total, at $4 million a year. The Office of Energy previously spoke to this authority several months ago on that project. We're still going through evaluating that project and determining the manner in which that's going to be implemented. We also have 2 rebate programs under the IRA on home energy efficiency and performance, and those 2 programs are about $44 million each. And currently we're working on the implementation of that, how that's going to be implemented, and setting forth the structure and the process to which we can roll that out. Other programs, there's numerous programs related to building code training, workforce training. Won't go into all of those, but they cross the gambit of energy efficiency. And then, importantly, the Office of Energy is a member of NASEO. That's the National Association of State Energy Officials. This is a tremendous resource. NASEO provides technical support, legal support. They provide updates on legal challenges to the energy industry. They provide significant detail on funding opportunities, federal budgets. Basically, they provide tremendous support to all state energy offices and then offers collaboration with other state offices to see what's working in other states, what didn't work in other states, and it is a tremendous resource that I'm only recently becoming familiar with. So those are the major programs we do. There are other duties with the Office of Energy. We have a benchmarking requirement of the state code that we're to benchmark the electrical use of all state buildings to determine their efficiency and any ghost meters to try to lower the efficiency, to lower the electrical use of those buildings. Universities and colleges on energy research. And I think that's something that we'd be very interested in increasing that and looking for some leadership and ideas from the authority as well. And then perhaps one of the most important ones in terms of this authority, and I'll read from the state code, is the Office of Energy. In addition to any such duties and responsibilities as prescribed by this code, the Office of Energy is responsible for managing and administering the daily functions of the Public Energy Authority and performing all other duties necessary to allow this authority to carry out its charter. So by code, we are to be supporting this authority in its actions, in its projects, and its directives in the way that it wants to go. So I just bring that to the authority's attention. I think that's to be a lot of coordination, collaboration, and support from our office to you. So what I want to close on that is our goals. What is the Office of Energy's goals? And when I was first appointed, I stated that one of our goals was to become West Virginia become a national energy leader. I've had several people say, well, that's a pretty lofty goal. I started realizing that it's not a goal, it's an expectation. It's an expectation from this administration that we become a national energy leader. And I'll take it a step further. It's not only an expectation, it's a requirement. If you look to the West Virginia Code, it says as law that the West Virginia Office of Energy is to promote initiatives to enhance the nation's energy security, and that we are to ensure the state's energy resources are the resources that fuel the nation. It's required by law that we help promote West Virginia resources and pushing the nation forward. So the question is not what are we going to do, it's how. How do we meet this objective as the Office of Energy? And again, it's not a secret. There are three primary components set out in West Virginia Code. First is ensuring that we have a dependable electric grid. Second is providing energy security by increasing the ratio of indigenous energy compared to imported energy. West Virginia is to increase its use of energy generated in-state so that we can provide energy security to our residents and not have to rely on energy from other sources. And then the last one is to increase the development and production of new and existing domestic energy sources. To me, this is the most important directive. West Virginia is embracing new energy sources such as wind and solar. The legislature's removed the ban on nuclear energy, and the IRA and IIJ are providing significant opportunities that we are pursuing consistent with West Virginia's objectives. The critical part of that is to support new and existing energy sources. That means supporting coal generation. That means supporting continued natural gas in the state. And that's what I believe is going to help us meet our requirement of becoming an energy power. So it's more than a goal, it's more than an expectation. From our view, it's a must. Office of Energy does not expect that it's going to do it alone. It's going to be with the continued leadership of this administration. It's a collaborative effort with this authority, the PSC, the DEP, the Public Service Commission, and private industry. And together, I believe that group can help us meet that requirement of becoming a national energy leader. I know that's high level, but that's the goal. We look forward to working with you guys, making that happen. So with that, Mr. Chairman, any questions or comments?
Thank you very, very much. Mr. Preservati, any questions?
Order, congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
good luck.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, guys.
Now on to our next agenda item, which is related to the presentation we just heard. As Nick mentioned, the Office of Energy is statutorily tasked with providing and administrating support from the Public Energy Authority. We have not, utilized that over the last year or so since we've been reactivated for different reasons, but with Nick's kind of infusion of enthusiasm and expertise into this office, I believe that now is the time to start utilizing that and maximize the effectiveness of this authority. The statutes on the Public Energy Authority also reference a director of the authority. It doesn't mandate it as it wants to, but it does reference, contemplates, allows for the authority to have a director. So it is my suggestion that we officially take action to give Nicholas Preservati a field designation in addition to what he is serving with the Office of Energy, and also designate him as the Director of the Public Energy Authority, and which will better enable him to provide us with the administrative support that we're going to need as we become even more active. So this time, if there's, is there a motion?
So moved. Second, absolutely too.
Well, the question is on a motion to, further motion is to appoint Nicholas Preservati as the Director of the Public Energy Authority. We had a second. Is there any debate? Question? Any questions on the adoption of the motion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right, the ayes have it. Nicholas Preservati is now appointed as the Director of the Public Energy Authority. At this time, we'll move on to announcements. I'll announce that our next regular meeting will be scheduled for August 30th. However, I'll be in touch. We're examining, we've received public comments on our emergency rule that was filed 53 CSR 5, so we're examining those. I'll take a look at the timeline with our attorneys to see if we might have to come back earlier to take action or any later, I'm not sure. We haven't dug into it yet or looked at the timeline. There may be no action required, but we'll be in touch. So there could be a meeting earlier than the 30th, a special meeting, or perhaps later, but we'll be in touch. Also give an announcement somewhat related to that rule. We've had good news developments on the Pleasance Power Plant. It has been, there's a purchase agreement between two entities. It's been publicly reported. Also, FERC has approved that transition recently, which is good news. The Energy Harbor is still operating and producing electricity at the Pleasance Power Plant, and it's my understanding they'll continue to happen until transition time is ready. I plan on bringing folks to give an update on that transition and the nature of that deal when the time's appropriate. They have an agreement that has not yet closed, so I think upon that time we'll bring and learn more about it and its impact on the state's energy production. Any other announcements? Seeing none, any remarks by members? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move the adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.